Hey y'all, welcome to Art of the Budget. It's not a great month, as you can see by this big red number in the top of the screen, but let's get into why and what happened. If you're new here, my name's Nicole. This is Art of the Budget. My pronouns are she and her, and I live in the Pacific Northwest in what is the traditional territory of the Coast Salish nations. I am an artist and educator currently learning about budgeting, saving, and planning for retirement, and sharing what I learn as I bumble my way through all of this. This is my September 19 budget reconciliation. So I love to reconcile my budget because it lets me know how I did. And this month I didn't do great. Now, I do want to start by saying, and I've already kind of reflected on this before, I'm very thankful to be in a position where I have gone over budget, but I have the cash to weather it. This is life. It's not an endurance game. I had some. I used maybe I bought things when I wanted to buy them, and I didn't necessarily have them in the budget. And I also had some things come up that I couldn't really get around. And like car trouble. And so, like I said, I'm really thankful to have the actual cash to weather this. But I do love the feeling of having predicted my budget well and being able to, finish the month out strong. All right. So clearly we've got this friend here. This is Violet. She's keeping me company. It's real cold here all of a sudden in the Pacific Northwest. I saw on Instagram that it's snowing in Montana, probably other places, but I just happened to have a friend post about it. And I'm glad that is not the case here. It's just about 40 or 50 degrees in the afternoon. And neither of us are enjoying it very much, Violet and I, so we're sticking close to each other. Okay, so let's go over the kind of highlights of the budget. I had planned to bring in $3,000. So if you're new here, I've just recorded what I planned in my notebook, and then I've reconciled the budget within every dollar. So I had planned $3,000. I actually brought in $3,088.35. So to reconcile the budget, I change that plan number to the actual number at the end of the month. And I record on a piece of paper, or sometimes I do it in Google Sheets, what I had actually planned and what was the actual. So I do have a record of that, but I can see in every dollar where I went wrong. Okay, so I also had some reimbursements of $138.85. I hadn't planned on any. I did kind of work those reimbursements from traveling with friends into my budget down below so that I could keep track of what was my budget and what was the reimbursement, if that makes sense. That was pretty much it. Interest income, I knew what I was going to get and I got it, or actually I know before I do the monthly budget. Sharing my income, I actually had planned to share $150 and I only shared $45. And still the situation up here is not great. So I just went ahead and brought this down for the month. And then the same with 2% to art. I had planned to spend 60 and I spent 50. So I just brought it down. Here, I'll put this in spent so you can see it usually matches. For savings, I wasn't planning on doing much aside from that interest income, which if you are new here, you wouldn't know that I just keep it in this random little separate bank account because I love seeing that I have made almost $100 just by having an emergency fund. So I love that a lot. So I always keep that separate. All right. Retirement, $500 as usual to my Roth IRA. Household stuff was pretty much all regular except internet. This was the month that my promotion expired, so I had to call and negotiate. I should be seeing a credit for that and next month's bill, but we'll see. I did have to call multiple times to talk to multiple people, so y'all know how that is, the internet negotiation dance. Gas, I had actually planned a little more than usual because I I worked in, I drove when I traveled with some friends, so they reimbursed me for gas, so I worked that in. So I technically had planned for 132 and I spent 109.97. So I was a little under there. Can't complain. In daily living, I was basically over across the board. For groceries, I had planned 425 and I spent 497. I was in the midst of making a lot of freezer meals for the fall quarter, so I knew I would go over. I also went camping, so I knew that I would go over, so I planned for 425 instead of 300, and I still went over 497.83. Now I feel like some things are like still in the pantry. So, again, I'm hoping to see, like, for example, I got a butcher box and I've used basically nothing from it. So I should see some like recoup on that in the future months, but we'll see. Again, restaurants, not again, also in restaurants, I had planned 135, which is a little over because, again, I worked in that reimbursement from traveling with friends. And I spent 176.61. So I was pretty over there. Household was similar. I'd planned for 50 and I spent 64.71. So about $15 over. Health, I was right on, but I actually was too busy to go do this hike. So that was kind of a bummer. And in pets, I had planned 140 and I spent almost 190. No, yeah, wait. Hold on a second. All right, so I don't know if that changed that a little. Okay, so I had planned in 140. See, even when I go through and I reconcile before, sometimes I miss things, and that's fine. I had planned 140 and I spent 183.04. I did get an extra bag of cat food. So my cats are on very expensive, the most expensive, I feel like, prescription food. And I got 2 bags and it worked out kind of for the best because I go through about a bag a month, but I'm always like scraping the bottom of the barrel by the end of the month. So now I have kind of a bag ahead. So that works out nicely. So I wish I would have planned for it, but it was sort of for the best in the end. Entertainment was kind of rough this month. I had planned for $6.51, which is my Hulu charge, and I spent $38.75. But I did go to the movies, and that was totally worth it and totally awesome. However, I paid for Spotify on accident, and I do not think that was worth it. So I'm a little bummed about that. Okay, so going on down. Insurance and taxes, everything was good. Debt, everything was good. In my sinking funds, well, this is kind of like the opposite of sinking funds. My goal for the end of the year is to have these kind of stocked up, especially the important ones, or I should say like the more used ones. They're all important or I would have removed them. But in the health fund, I had planned nothing and I spent 2407. Car upkeep, I had planned nothing and I spent 357.85 for a car repair. That was much needed. In gifts, I'd planned nothing and spent 12.89. In clothing and shoes, planned nothing, spent $65. I'm actually going to change that because I spent $65, but I did have $16.55 in there. So I'm going to bring this down to $50. I'm going to bring this down to $49.45. Oh, shit. Math is not my strong suit. 48.45. There we go. All right. So slightly bringing this number down by doing these things correctly. In travel, I had planned 131.52 and I spent 441.57. And also finally an owner equity for my studio. Normally I keep these things totally separate, but I had a mishap last month where I lost one of my checks for teaching. And so I wasn't sure that I had the money in my bank account and I didn't want to risk it. So I just sort of put this in. I have this down here for this reason. Owner equity, I had planned 0 and I spent $25.88. Okay, so rough scene, not great. Let's look at the numbers. I do love looking over here. I mean, it's kind of cool. I only spent 23% on housing, which I appreciate. I always like to look at these numbers, but basically I've got this 27% in the sinking funds, which is basically this month, not sinking funds. It was on planned things. And this total, it was total over $700, $57.53.58, which is a lot. Now, something that does make me feel a little better is that $357.85 was for car repair. That was needed. And so that is I would consider a legit emergency. My goal for the end of the year is to have my car sinking fund stocked up so that I don't have to go into my emergency fund for car repair like that. But at the time, that is not the case. So I would consider that an official emergency. And then I also spent $167.37 on a flight to Florida, which is basically going to see my family for the holidays. And again, my goal is to have travel be more actually stocked and be planning that better. But I was able to get a good flight, use my points to pay a really affordable fee, and then have the cash, even though it wasn't my emergency fund and this was not a legitimate emergency, to pay for it. And that totals $525.22. So I was still over $200 over in my regular budget, which isn't great, but that does make me feel a little better. Now, I'm finally just going to reconcile this. And the way that I do that is I add $753.58 to miscellaneous income. I both put it in the planned and then I add it as a transaction. Don't remember the number, $753.58. And this is from EF on Happy Face. And then finally, $753.58 has to come out of my emergency fund. So I'm adding that as a transaction. I think it was $753.58. So that is reflected here. Okay, that is how I do that. Let me know down below if you use EveryDollar, if there's another way that you've found to do that transaction. Also, let me know down below how your September went. Please tell me your wins if you've got them, and commiserate with me if you don't. October, I have my new side hustle, and I have my old side hustle starting up again. This is adjunct teaching. So I am hoping for a really excellent month in October, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you later.